Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we'll be doing a quick run through of slope and slope-intercept form. So the slope of a line is the steepness of a line. So you can think about steepness the same way you would if you were thinking about climbing a mountain or a hill. Certain parts of that or certain mountains or hills may be more steep or less steep. And when we calculate it, we're actually going to calculate it from left to right on a graph. So we'll see four possibilities when we're talking about the slope of a line in algebra. We could have a positive slope, a negative slope, a slope equal to 0, or an undefined slope. So a positive slope is a slope, when you look at it, that moves up from left to right. So you can see this one starts lower on the left side and gets higher on the right side. So that will be a positive slope. For a negative slope, it's just the opposite. The left side is higher than the right side and it's moving downward. For slope equals 0, that means that the line will be perfectly flat and horizontal. And for an undefined slope, that means that the slope will be perfectly up and down. The line we see will be perfectly up and down, and so it's undefined. Now, how do we calculate slope? Well, there's a formula for that. The variable that we use for slope is the letter m, and that's an important thing to tuck away and memorize. Slope is represented with m. So our equation is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, this may seem like a very complex equation and something difficult to work with, but when we plug in the pieces, I think it'll show itself to be a lot simpler than it looks right now. So let's look at it in action. So if we have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, we need to fill in those variables x1 and y1, x2 and y2 with some points on the line that we see. Now, we need 2 points to figure out slope because we have to have a distance on the line to be able to figure out how steep it is. So we'll pick one of our points to be x1 and y1 and another one of our points to be x2 and y2. And just like you would map a point on a graph with the x coordinate first and the y coordinate second, that's the same thing that we will see on this activity. So here we'll see y2 minus y1. So I picked my x2 and y2 coordinate to be the 0, 7. So I'm going to take the y coordinate from that, which is the 7, and put it in my y2. That means my x1 and y1 are going to be the 4, 4. So I will take the 4 from the y coordinate and put it on there too. So that means that my top line, y2 minus y1, is just 7 minus 4. For the bottom line, x2 minus x1, I'm going to go again to my x2, which remember, keep it the same as the one that you had in the y2. So it's the 0, 7. So I'll take the 0 and subtract the x1 from it, which is 4. So I have 0 minus 4. So 7 minus 4 is 3 and 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So that means that my slope for this line is negative 3/4, or if we wanted to change it to a decimal, we could say negative 0.75. Now with this line, before we even get started, we could have told you that it was going to be negative from what we just learned. The line moves downward from left to right. So we knew that whatever number we got was going to be negative. That's another good check to do at the end to make sure that the answer that you got from this equation makes sense with what you know about positive and negative slopes. So another thing we want to cover when we're talking about slope is the slope-intercept form. Now, this is a way of writing out a line, an equation for a line, to understand more about it and to plot additional points on that line. So for slope-intercept form, the formula we need is y equals mx plus b. And here, the x and the y will stand for a charted point on the line. So for today, we actually won't need to fill in those variables, but we will keep their placeholders there. And remember that when we have a charted point, we can fill in that information with those x and y coordinates. The m stands for the slope, just like we just learned in our last activity. And the B is for the place where the line touches the y-axis. So all of this may look a little confusing right now. I would encourage you to memorize that y equals mx plus b as just something to tuck into your head and remember that that is slope-intercept form. Once you know that formula and you understand a bit about what goes into that formula, all you really have to do is plug in the information. So let's look at an example. We're going to use the graph that you see on the screen here as a way of solving this and putting it into slope-intercept form. So we have y equals mx plus b, and the first and easiest thing to fill in is that b. The b is where the line hits the y-axis. So if you follow the line, we see that here we go all the way to the y-axis. It hits right here, which is -1. And we'll plug that in for B. Now we need to fill in the M for the slope. So to find the slope, we will need to do our full slope formula, which again is M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're going to assign which point will be the 2 and which point will be the 1. We're going to use 0, negative 1 for x2 and y2. And we're going to use the 3 for x1 and y1. So when we plug in our variables, the y's are -1 minus 3, and the x's are 0 minus 3. So we're going to get then -1 minus 3 is -4, and 0 minus 3 is -3. So when we have -4 over -3, if you remember the rule about a negative divided by a negative, they actually cancel each other out. So our final answer then will be 4 over 3. So when we look at our line, again, we can know that it's going to be a positive slope because we see that from left to right, the line is moving upward. Now, when we plug that in, we get y equals 4/3 times x plus -1, or we can simplify it even a bit more and say y equals 4/3 x minus 1, because plus a negative is the same as subtracting. And that would be our simplest form to get our slope-intercept form for this particular graph. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new about slope and slope-intercept form. And don't forget to check out all of our other videos on our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe so that you get the latest updates about every video we post. Check us out too on Instagram and Facebook and our website at helmsacademy.org.